very serious and they're like lovelorn, or who said that they're finally feeling like a poet? Was that Pat Curry? Because
Yeah.
he's depressed. You know, it's not worth it. Humor a lot of times is I'm never intentional about it, but sometimes it's really fun being weird in poems, right? You can be really weird, you can be really strange, you can say really strange things. This is just one of those poems. This is called Undrunk. I want you guys to just think of all the parties you've ever been to and all of the open bottles of beer or beer cans or wine glasses just left on the side. Okay. Undrunk. Eventually, it is flattening to be an open beer, to have an absence of bubbles, a room temperature warmth. Unlike your average can of beer, which is born cold and consumed cold, shattered, crushed, tossed, possibly shotgunned or bombed, the faint hum of electricity calls to me through the drywall. It's not like I'm out in the garden drowning slugs, or even able to tell time, but my psychotherapist says I've got a bad attitude. At some point, I must have been ditched, a non-linear afterthought, trying to make my way back to lips I faintly remember. Does anybody out there have any questions about poetry? I mean, I don't really know much about it, except that I really like it. Karen did.
Could you just talk about what you studied in school?
That's a really great question. What did I study in school? How did I study poetry?
Study poetry.
How do you study it? You know, there's a poet that's not here tonight, Tony Alcantara. So Tony's not here. Tony's a really good example of one of the ways that you can study poetry. You can go to your local library or bookstore, and you can just begin to consume it. You just read it. You read a book. You read a book, and you look through that book, and you say, that poem's all right there. The whole rest of them are not really doing anything for me. So you just read book after book, and then you can start reading books about poetry. Okay, like Jane Hirschfield has a book called 9 Gates about poetry. Anne Lamott, Bird by Bird, just about writing. Richard Hugo, Triggering Town. Tony Hoagland has this book about poetry called Real Sophistication, and he even spells it like Sophistication or something, sophistication. Beautiful and Pointless is another really great book by Gregory Orr. Really beautiful book about poetry. So you can read books about, so you're reading poetry, deciding what you like. There's all these genres of poetry out there, right? Just like music. A lot of times we think poetry is just one thing, but it's a whole lot of things. And finding the poetry that you like is important. How many of you out there like Robert Frost? Were there any Robert Frost readers out there? Robert Frost and Sharon Olds. Sharon Olds is hot. Oh yeah. Oh yes, we have Sharon Olds. There's all these poets to read out there. Listening to all of our local community poets. Really, I'm just avoiding talking about school. I think probably the best professor I ever had was Tess Gallagher, who was a partner with Jack Gilbert for a while. Not Jack Gilbert, Tess Gallagher and his Raymond Carver, Raymond Carver. And I was thinking about Lindy right there. So Tess, I was a freshman in undergrad, and I got into a poetry seminar of like 60 people, and she was the first person that really, I thought poetry was this really like wowie-zowie thing where you're just, you're sharing your emotions, and like, last night I ate my mac and cheese and wept. The thought of her stuck between my teeth. Couldn't get rid of it. And for our first journal assignment, I doodled and had all this like really wowie-zowie stuff, and I turned it in. I got it back, and then it was like D-, and then this note that said, "Come see me," right? And so I showed up into Tessa's office, and she's such a wonderful, wonderful woman, an incredible poet too. And she was like, Cam, she's like, I can tell you're a gushy guy, you're soft. You know, you're a soft, gushy guy. She's like, this is really beautiful, but this isn't doing anything. You're not really digging into the bones, right? You're not digging into the bones of it. You're not reading poems and really seeing what they are talking about. Because our assignment was to like read a poet and read a poem and really think about what that poetry was doing. What was the poem doing? Was it a single stanza sticking poem? Was it multiple stanzas? Was it in lines and stuff? I'm only going to talk about poetry because I'm kind of going off. But I really love it. And anyway, and so that was huge to me, just realizing that poetry was a craft, okay? That poetry was more than just expression, it was a craft. And then I went to the University of Arizona where I was a complete and utter failure. I was like 23. We were all like duking it out and infighting, and I didn't write a single poem for an entire year after I graduated. I couldn't. I had too much anxiety. And so for me, a lot of it was reclaiming poetry, like poetry that I had, what did I think was true in the craft of poetry? What did I admire in the craft of poetry? So that's kind of just read and write a lot. If you can write a poem every day for like a year, you're going to get to be a lot better poet, because you're going to have to figure out weird ways of writing stuff. Like it just every day, and every day we're very different. I'll read you one other kind of silly one. So I spend my winters in Wallowa County, and yeah, Wallowa County. Thank you, Barbara Dills. It's like it's a county of 7,000 people, and 6,000 people. You know, it's like 5,000 in the summertime when we all leave. And in Wallowa County, there's all these really wonderful people, and one of those wonderful people was my roommate. And I didn't have a lawnmower because I'm a poet, you know, I was like, and he picked up a lawnmower, but the lawnmower had 3 wheels. And I attempted to mow my lawn this spring with it. The lawnmower showed up at my house last summer and came with a cardboard sign that said free. A renter left it in the old hexagonal shingled shed. When I came home in the fall, there was no grass to mow, and so it sat as the snow fell on the metal roof, and I sat next to the stove and dreamt of perfectly shorn rows of grass, and the grill going, and maybe a little Stevie Ray Vaughan, as late tendrils of spring sun cut through unfurling leaves, birdsong, and plum blossoms. Sure enough, spring showed up, and the grass grew. And I filled up a red container and gassed the mower, checked the oil, spun its old rusty blade, then pulled the cord. And pulled the cord again, and again, and fiddled with switches and chokes and throttles until it rattled to life. Even with 3 wheels, it cut the rows I dreamt during winter as I leaned a little harder to the right on the push bar, which had a nice loose tank. And when all the rows were finished and all the dandelions laid to rest, it continued to roar with life. It would not stop. Not now, not for free. So I left it spinning its wheels against the shed door until it finally ran out of just a brief, so the Book of Ocho. I really am in love with this book still, and one of the reasons why is there's a whole lot of sad things in this book. Ocho was this amazing cat who passed away from lymphoma, but what came to me in the between moments was humor, and I guess I have to read this poem because I don't know, I like humor a lot, and it's really my favorite poem to read ever, especially to high school students. This is called Ocho Sends Another Message, and anyway, how many of you, lots of you have heard this poem before, but that's okay. Ocho sends another message. Listen up, Kim Nuzzo. I like things a certain way. I expect you to be home at certain times to feed me and pet me and pluck my birds, skin my mice, scratch me beneath the chin, swing the headless garden snake in circles so I can practice my pounds. You know I'm worth it. that look like a frickin' tiger. Gorgeous, regal, elliptical in a course of the moon kind of way. If I catch you packing with an open suitcase, I'll crawl inside it and urinate while looking into your eyes, looking into my eyes, the rainy yellow windows of the soul. Your bed tonight was just a taste of what I can do. Routine disrupted, hours changed. Good thing you are not the size of a sparrow. So this is definitely for sale. It's very negotiable. If you're a poor college student, it will be much cheaper than if you live on Red Hill. Just a heads up. But not really. It's very inexpensive. I might read 2 more poems tonight. Any other questions about... I have a question for you guys. Why do you read... How many of you in here read poems? I'm just curious. How many of you in here write poems?